Okay, let's go over day 3 of final day of Norway Supreme Court hearing. See, I have not looked at any of this, so let's see. Former Jehovah's Witnesses who are attending the final day of the Supreme Court hearing. It is very far from heavy material. It does not indicate difficult family conflicts or difficult upbringings. Okay. Watchtower's defense regarding their publications on shunning. See how they try and weasel their way out. Supreme Court, House Norway. On the final day of the Supreme Court hearing, Anders Risdal, Watchtower's defense will conclude his arguments, and then the state is allowed to respond before the day ends. If you see the beginning of Risdal's arguments from the 6th, for the final day, more former Jehovah's Witnesses, including Jan Frode Nielsen and Sorayas Naras, traveled to Oslo. I have no clue who those two people are. Norway to attend the final day hearing. They arrived first with the herd of Jehovah's Witnesses behind them. Jan Niesel and Sorayas were able to get seats front and center in the courtroom. Jan will be going on the national broadcast this evening at 7 o'clock CET. To speak about the hearing, the avoidjw team thanks all the former Jehovah's Witnesses attending and giving us updates, but also the ones who testified in the past years. We understand how difficult it is to open up about these things, and our hearts go out to them for their courage. Absolutely, those people are very courageous for speaking. Today the oral arguments wrap up, and it concludes more into internal operations with velvet curtains. First, the justices retreat from the bench and the courtroom clears. Next would come the justices' private conference in a closed room. No rulings will be announced today, nor are any outcomes revealed. It will be a few weeks until we hear their decision. I figured that. But for now, here are the summaries and updates on Risdal's closing arguments. Language, control, and the fight over definitions. I don't understand how Watchtower can sit there and fight over the definition of a word because they want to try and hide their abuse. I just can't think of anything more childish than that, in trying to hide what they have done. They have normal contact with family members who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, with schools and friends. Before Risdal's continued his argument, this is Watchtower's defense. Before Risdal continued his argument from February 6th, Liv Gabrielson, the state introduced additional documentation drawn directly from Jehovah's Witnesses' own publications, material already referenced in earlier proceedings, but now formally placed before the court. The focus was not on new evidence, but meaning. At issue was terminology used internally by Jehovah's Witnesses, language the state argued carries real-world consequences and which Rizdal was quick to neutralize. On February 6, Rizdal brought up the term shunning and the meaning in Norwegian, attempting to downplay its definitions. It's also important to note that there is no word for apostate in Norwegian. The translation for them is ones against Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, what kind of like language is that? I really don't know. I mean, I'm considered an apostate, but if you ask me where I against Jehovah's Witnesses practicing their religion, no, I'm not. I'm more so against the torment that Watchtower places on their own members. I don't care that these people believe in what they believe in. They have every right to. I care that people are getting abused and it's being hush hush every chance the Watchtower gets. Jehovah's Witnesses had coined the term apostate as a feared and negatively judged role on being against them, and in English it would be the same definition. Rizzo immediately sought to downplay the state's material and significance on the matter, describing the submissions as marginal and stressing that they introduce no new evidence. His focus quickly shifted to language, specifically meaning of the term used in Jehovah's Witnesses publications that the state argues reflects a broader practice of social exclusion. I don't know how they can hide from this, because the thing is that many Jehovah's Witnesses pride themselves on being excluded from the rest of society. It's something that they look at as a plus, as a bonus, to say that they are better than the rest of society because they are Jehovah's Witnesses. So I think that social exclusion is the right term to use here. The expression in an English verb, it basically means to avoid. In itself, it is quite neutral and not practically burdensome. Rizdal repeatedly insisted that the word would not be associated with coercion, psychological harm, or family rupture. No, of course not. Never. It's never that whenever the courts are looking. Dismissing such interpretations as exaggerations. It is very far from heavy material. It does not indicate difficult family conflicts or difficult upbringings. This whole statement is a lie. At this point, members of the court press for clarification, probing whether the issue before them was merely linguistic or whether the effect of the practice described by the language were what mattered. The judges question how the term functions in real life, practically when applied to baptized members, including minors, rather than engage directly with the distinction. As here goes Watchtower deflecting. Rizdal pivoted to witness testimony, presenting series of carefully selected accounts intended to demonstrate normality and social integration. He emphasized that Jehovah's Witness children attend school, have friends outside the faith, and maintain contact with non-witness family members. Okay, so the argument is not that they can maintain contact with non-witness family members. The argument is that when a witness family member becomes a non-witness family member, can they still maintain contact with them? And well, I was born into that organization. So from the time I was born up until I was 28, 29, the answer was no. Um, and as far as Watchtower has said, they have made it, and so the whole world must practice the same thing. That witnesses all across the world must practice the same thing. So how is it that they can go and make it look like, oh well, they said, it doesn't matter if your family is witnesses or not? No, that's not what matters. What matters is if they were witnesses before and now they're not. They have normal conduct with family members who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, with schools and friends. Okay, so what about family members that were no longer Jehovah's Witnesses? Several judges followed up asking whether these descriptions applied universally or whether they changed under certain conditions, such as a baptism or disciplinary action. Rizzo maintained that family bonds generally persist, again relying on individuals' stories rather than organizational policy. Rizzo swears baptism is never pressured. My guy, when you are told as a child that your family and God will love you more if you get baptized, that is pressured. I mean, how did they get away with doing this in court of all places? Advocates Jen Frody Nilsson and Sorayas Narez at the Supreme Court hearing, negative social control is not a legal concept under Norwegian law. On baptism, Rizdal strongly rejected the idea of pressure, stressing parental involvement in maturity requirements. It's the parents who wasn't it on Friday that they were just bringing out how people as young, I'll put it in their terms, people as young as 11, like, who knows what they want to do for the rest of their life when they are 11 years old? On baptism, Rizzo strongly rejected the idea of pressure, stressing parental involvement and maturity requirements. It's the parents who know whether their child are maturing enough to be baptized, and they must have full freedom of choice. Sure, I'm guessing it is full freedom of choice in Watchtower standards when the kid is told to study their Watchtower and study their books for the midweek meeting, and all throughout those books, it's written enough times to where it's basically enforced that if you don't get baptized, you're gonna die. Yeah, that really gives full freedom of choice right there. He noted that many children never get baptized and face no consequences for that decision. Well, what about the ones that do get pressured into baptized? What about them? What went unexamined in the farming? Sorry, what went unexamined in this framing was how consequences differ once baptism occurs. At a point the judge returned to later in the discussion. Um, one of the day's most consequential exchanges. Hold on, I need to zoom this in. One of the day's most consequential exchanges came as Risdale addressed the state's use on the term negative social control. He argued that the concept lacks legal grounding, citing official government reports that describe it as vague, um, culturally dependent, and unsuitable as a basis for sanctions. Negative social control is not a legal concept under Norwegian law. I don't know how the laws work in Norway for things like, say, social media, right? Um, I do know that when I was a teenager and even into being like a adult teenager, so like 18, 19, elders in the kingdom hall that I went to would go around. They would take the miners' phones and they would go through their social media on their phones. That is something that is negative social control. Also, looking at who the miners hang out with when they don't know that they're being watched is negative social control. This is what Watchtower does, and this is what Watchtower says that they do. The two things never line up, especially when the courts are looking. The judges challenged this position, asking whether the absence of a precise legal definition necessarily prevents the state from assessing real-world practices, especially where children's rights are concerned. Risdale responded by warning that denying state subsidies on such grounds would amount to a punitive measure without a clear legal basis. You are denying something that absolutely everyone gets, and then you are within the legal requirement. Once again, they're just crying because they know that they're wrong. What they did was wrong. They're trying so hard to cover it up now, and they're not being denied the to practice their religion. They're not under a ban. They're not being told that they can't go out and preach, that they cannot go to their meetings. They just don't want to give them money because of all the shit that they've done in the past. Risdale framed the case as one of state overreach and linguistics misinterpretations, while the court repeatedly returned to questions of impact, predictability, and proportionality. The central fault line was unmistakable. Is this case about words and whether they can be legally defined, or about practices and whether the law is permitted to name their consequences? Watchtower wants it to be about words because they know how to jump and twist words like they've done with their publications and their Bibles. And so they can hide the abuse that they do. So Watchtower definitely wants it to be a case about words. And the subsidies became leverage and benefits become the target. We are 5.5 million inhabitants in Norway. About 12,000 are Jehovah's Witnesses. Children attend public school. Adults work in ordinary jobs. Family ties continue. As the Supreme Court hearing continued, the focus sharpened from abstract legal concepts to something far more concrete: whether the state is actively demanding changes to Jehovah's Witness doctrine as a condition for registration and funding. This concern surfaced most clearly when attention turned to the state's own decision documents. In the formal notice of loss of registration, the consequences of the subsidy denial were laid out in stark terms. According to the decision, Jehovah's Witnesses were given a deadline to rectify the situation that led to the denial of state subsidies. If the community wished to regain funding, it would need to document corrective measures and submit them to the state administrator within a fixed time frame. Crucially, the decision specified what those corrections would need to address. The documentation must concern the religious teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, including practices related to social distancing. This passage did not go unnoticed by the court. The implication was difficult to ignore. State funding would remain unavailable unless core religious teachings were altered, such as the shunning that they say doesn't exist, or at the minimum redefine to satisfy the state's interpretation of acceptable practices. Jehovah's Witnesses were further informed that they had 4 weeks to appeal. Social distancing versus social isolation. Wow. I guess this is what they planned on doing to receive funding if they were ever looked at the states. That's probably why they changed the rules for this fellowshipping to where when someone is removed from the congregation, people can still walk up and say hello to them. So that counts as social distancing. Whereas before, when they were at the Kingdom Hall, nobody would talk to them. Nobody would have anything to say or do with them because Jehovah's always watching and you don't want to disappoint Jehovah. Rizzo also challenged the state's use of the term negative social control, arguing that it conflates religious discipline with social isolation without factual basis. Without factual basis? My guy, your own literature says that you do this. I don't care if they come out with new light because of this whole situation and they're trying to patch up the holes in their argument going forward, to change it to where people can talk about anything. I still think that they should be held accountable for the amount of depression and suicide that the social isolation they enforce on the ex-members causes. Because if your whole family is in there, they don't talk to you. We are 5.5 million inhabitants in Norway. About 12,000 are Jehovah's Witnesses. Children attend public schools. Whatever. Ordinary jobs, family ties continues. I don't know how children attend public schools. Yay. Kids are allowed to get a basic education in as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Good job, Watchtower. Good job. What about when the kids have to get up and go to the library to be excused from the classroom when there's a holiday event going on in the classroom? Or when kids are told, no, you cannot play sports, you cannot compete because competition is the way of the world. How is that a child living a normal life when they're being restricted from things they want to do but they can't do, and it's perfectly normal for a child to do that? Or on the flip side, what about for like adults with ordinary jobs and it comes around Christmas time and they're assigning secret Santas in the workplace, and all the adults that work there that are Jehovah's Witnesses have to say, I don't believe in Santa. I'm not going to participate. Do you see here how no matter in what faculty of life from child to adult that you look at things at. Jehovah's Witnesses always have to have their own little special thing carved out because they're not normal. He reminded the court that family and private lives are protected under Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights and Section 102 of the Constitution, knowing that even the state's own witnesses had described normal social interaction. Social distancing does not mean social isolation. I think that it does. I think that it does mean social isolation. People are talking to you from a distance instead of being right there for you for whatever you need. So instead of you have some big issue going on and you really need help from your family, well, you're still left in isolation because your family won't talk to you. So I don't know how they mean to get away with it not being social isolation, because if you distance yourself from something, you're trying to isolate it from yourself. You're trying to stay away from it. How is that not social isolation? Live consequences. The hearing. Oh, also, by the way, for the whole they don't do social isolation thing. So if I wanted to have any contact with my family right now, right? This is what I would have to do. I am a pagan. I practice witchcraft. I'm very much happy here where I am right now. And I am very thankful for sites like avoidjw.org for what they really do bring out. This is how much I would have to change. Not only would I have to go to a kingdom hall and not speak to anyone unless spoken to, I would have to throw away all of my literature that is based on Wicca and witchcraft and spells. And even then, I would still have to go back to reading the fucking disgusting shit that Watchtower pumps out on a weekly basis. So if this is not social isolation, then what is? What is it? Because the way that they go and they bring it out in conventions and in their broadcasts and stuff, we all serve the same God. We're all under Jehovah's tent. We're all under Jehovah's law for those that are witnesses. There have been plenty of times when people who have spoken to this fellowship people are themselves reproved or disfellowshipped because they were being spied on. You force your own social isolation when you do that, Watchtower. And just because you changed the rules, I don't know, when like 2-3 years ago, doesn't mean that all the deaths you are in blood you are accountable for, that you have gotten your hands on because you force this inhumane thing on your own people. It doesn't mean that it's just going to go away because you change the wording to social distancing. Lived consequences. The hearing then turned to testimony describing how the decision has affected Jehovah's Witnesses in practice. One of Jehovah's Witnesses called the decision deeply personal. Incredibly sad, my religion is just as important as everyone else's. No one is saying that your religion is not important. That's not what people are saying. People are saying that your religion goes against human rights because of the practices that are enforced. Several witnesses described concrete consequences, including the ability to marry in their kingdom hall For us, marriage is a sacred institution. To not be able to marry in your own place of worship is very sad. Okay, I can kind of see that, where they want to get married, but I guess because of their other policies that goes against human rights, they can't. Um, Others testified that stigma and hostility had increased following the state's decision. Jehovah's Witnesses are used to prejudice, but this has accelerated since the decision. Yeah, I'm sure it has. I'm sure a lot of things have accelerated for Watchtower after they found out that they're not going to get their money. Um, because that seems like to be the only time that Watchtower gives a damn about any of their members is only when they're not getting their money. Unequal treatment under scrutiny. Rizdal's further question why Jehovah's Witnesses were singled out when other religious communities with strict moral rules and exclusion practices continue to receive state support. The only thing that I can think of, right, that is similar are maybe like Methodists or Mormons. And Mormons has always had the thing, I believe, I might be wrong about this, but I do believe that Mormons have always had the thing where when one of their members is removed, they still talk to them. And they still have conversation. Okay? And by the way, Watchtower, when you go and you say that social distancing is not social isolation, not being able to have a conversation with someone is isolation. That is social isolation. Like only being able to go up to someone and say hi, hello, and that's it. That's where you need to stop to keep yourself, quote unquote, spiritually clean. That's social isolation. Oh my goodness. Unequal treatment under scrutiny. Wait, did I already read this one? I think I did. Wait, I think it stopped right here. None of these communities have been examined or sanctioned in the same way. None of them shun the same way that Jehovah's Witnesses do either. Citing submissions from the Helsinki Committee and Academic Research, he asked why no broader review of religious communities was conducted before targeting one group. The question is why Jehovah's Witnesses are being treated differently. I think the question should be why Jehovah's Witnesses treat people that leave their community differently. By the lunch break, the fault line was clear. The case now turns to whether Norway is applying neutral standards or whether the cumulative effects of its decision amount to serious and unequal interference with religious freedom, regardless of the labels attached to it. Changing the word does not change what is actually happening. Thank you. Thank you. Wait, what does it say up here in the final part of the Supreme Court? This is where sure quoted by Nick Cave. This much I know to be true. As the hearing moved into the final stretch, the courtroom settled into a tense rhythm. The state pressed forward, Watchtower's lawyers pushed back, and the judge repeatedly stepped in to test the foundations of both arguments. The state's closing position was blunt. It returned again and again to doctrine, insisting that Jehovah's Witnesses' own texts and teachings were sufficient to justify the denial of subsidies and registration. The practice of shunning, the state argued, is not a misunderstanding or matter of individual conscience. It's a core rule clearly expressed, consistently enforced, and backed by sanctions. This is the main rule. The state said, avoid contact, do not eat with such person. Even greeting can develop into more. That sounds like the watchtower I know. Attempts by Jehovah's Witnesses to soften the language, reframing shunning as social distancing, were dismissed as semantic maneuvering. Changing the word does not change what is actually happening. Yes, it's so good to see Watchtower get caught in their own fucking traps. It feels so good. The state emphasized that while exceptions exist, they are narrow, conditional, and do not alter to the overall I cannot say that word. Coercive effect. There we go. Members know the consequences in advance. They learn them through Watchtower literature, congregation attendance, and lived examples. Exactly. They are told this every week. In their publications. Because it doesn't matter. So the good thing I'm going to say that comes from Watchtower in this case, because they're getting what they deserve here. The good thing that comes out of it is that Watchtower has been so anal about the shunning that it doesn't matter what the topic is. It all leads down the same road. You're going against Jehovah's laws. You're talking to someone who has chosen to be part of Satan's world. It's going to turn into you also going out into Satan's world. And it doesn't matter what the topic is about. It really doesn't matter. It all just ends up being the same thing. And then they all the years that I've had to sit, other exjws that were once JWs had to sit there learning that no matter what the situation is, if you're shunned for it, you're taught that is God showing you his love. No, it's not. How does love equate to against my human rights? How Watchtower has managed to manipulate the word love into meaning something that goes against your human rights is something only a true linguist like Watchtower can pull off. Because they just pull the shit right out of their ass and flop it on a plate and serve it to everyone. Where did I stop at? I'm sorry. There we go. The state emphasized that while exemptions exist, they are narrow, conditional, and do not alter the overall coercive effect. Members know the consequences in advance. They learn them through Watchtower literature, congregation attendance, and lived examples. It is not hypothetical. Everyone knows what happens when the announcement is made. Yeah, that person is shunned, and anyone who continues to have conversation with the shunned person is also shunned. But it's more shunned in the beginning as like a shadow band, where like they still do a few things with you, and then eventually it does turn into that person also being shunned because Watchtower thinks that shunning is love somehow. Rizzo, speaking for Watchtower, pushed back hard. He argued that the state was overreaching, reading theology selectively. I like how Watchtower can selectively choose their language when it comes to theology, but when the same thing is done to them, they just panic. They don't know what to do. How could this not be the way that things work? Isolating scripture and sustaining its own interpretation for the religious community itself. Huh. How many public talks have I sat in where they have been isolating scriptures, or midweek meetings where they isolate scriptures to get it across to their religious community what they want to teach? He accused the state of building an interference case based on no concrete harm, but text alone. It's based on the text that you guys have printed out that is psychologically proven to cause concrete harm. If doctrine alone isn't enough, he warned, then this is a direct state intervention into religious belief. Yeah, it kind of is, because it doesn't matter what your belief is, everyone's human rights needs to be respected. Risdell repeatedly framed the subsidy decision as mild, preventive, and proportionate, not in order to change doctrine, but merely a refusal to fund practices that states consider harmful. Yes, going against somebody's human rights is harmful. And just because you get to get up there, well, that's how it's supposed to be when you're punished by God. You're supposed to have your human rights taken away. No, you're not. No, you're not. You cannot go and take someone's human rights away and treat them like trash just because you coined the term disfellowship, a mark made forever by God. You cannot treat people this way. Framing did not go unchallenged by Ben. Several judges zeroed in on the consequences rather than the labels. They questioned whether the loss of registration and denial of subsidies and the resulting limits on marriage, spiritual care, and public standing could really be dismissed as marginal. It was not the judges suggested. Sorry. This was not the judges suggested a symbolic measure. They also probed the state's reliance on religious texts, asking whether selective readings, especially where mitigating passages were ignored, could form on a sufficient bias for such a serious intervention. At one point, the tension crystallized around a single issue. The state responding to proven harm or preemptively sanctioning belief? The state answered without hesitation, "It does not need to wait for documented victims," she said. "The law allows preventive action where practices are likely to violate rights. The duty to protect, particularly where children are concerned, cannot depend on harm first occurring. The required specific victims would mean the state must fail before it can act." Wow. It would be nice if America would work this way. But the answer only sharpened the court's focus. Judges noted only while the state claimed a preventive mandate, it had also acknowledged relying on almost entirely on Watchtower's writing without independent investigation, except assessment or corroboration from child welfare or health authorities. By the time the final procedure points were addressed, one thing was unmistakable. The court was no longer weighing abstractions. In the end, the state's argument rests on a simple, uncomfortable truth. When a religious organization openly teaches that leaving will cost you your family, your community, and your social world, the harm does not need to be speculative to be real. Yes, the coercion is built into the system itself. The state is not policing belief, it is refusing to fund practices and predictably strip individuals, including children, of a genuine right to walk away without fear. Watchtower does not know any system that starts with the words without fear. They thrive on fear. Fear is how they get everything that they want out of their members. The line matters, and drawing is not and drawing it is not hostility towards religion. It is the state doing exactly what it is required to do. In a few weeks, the verdict will decide far more than funding. Look at all these people. So many people. The price we pay. As we reflect on the coverage over the past several years of Norway's The Price We Pay process, it's important to name what the case has always been about. Jehovah's Witnesses are not challenging the state out of principle. They are contesting the loss of tax subsidies and public legitimacy tied to practices that harm children and families. Exactly. In 2024, the organization introduced surface level rule adjustment that appeared designed to reduce scrutiny rather than address underlying harm. Throughout the Supreme Court hearings, their attorney repeatedly attempted to reframe and redefine lived realities. That's what they love to do. So they can say that this isn't harm, this is love from Jehovah. Bunch of shit. The same realities millions of former members recognize immediately. We know those realities well. Being avoided, shunned, or cut off by friends and family. Being baptized at a young age, feeling pressure to conform through service, obedience, and a rigid lifestyle because love, connection, and family are conditional. That's how they want it to be. That's how Watchtower wants it to be. That was the price we paid for being brought into this organization. Yes. That is the price so many of us have to pay for being brought into Jehovah's Witnesses and manipulated by Watchtower's lies, molested by congregational members or congregation leaders, and also having them poke and pry into our private lives, and them just being able to walk away and say, I can bully you like this because it's a mandate from God. Now, for the first time at a state level, the organization is being asked to face consequences. This does not erase the harm done. It does not undo lost childhoods, broken families, or decades of silence, but it doesn't matter. A corporate religious entity that enforces human rights restrictive practices should not receive automatic recognition or public funding under the banner of religion. Thank you. Thank you. This is what I want to see in the United States. And I'm not saying that because I don't want to see Jehovah's Witnesses not being able to practice their religion. Everyone has the right to a religion and the right to practice it. But when you're going against human rights, that's when the funding needs to be snipped. That's just how it should be, because when it's not snipped, these things turn into a authoritarian theocracy, and members feel powerless. People that get caught up in it feel powerless, and one of the reasons why they feel powerless is because Watchtower trains their people to go and look for vulnerable people to get sucked into their theology. And these people don't realize that they're getting sucked into a world where their rights as humans are diminished. The Norway process, now entering its 4th year, has centered on core issues: the shunning of former members, the baptism of minors, and the lifelong consequences imposed on those who leave regardless of age. The courage shown by former Jehovah's Witnesses who have testified, attended hearings, and consistently informed the public cannot be overstated. They have done this not out of bitterness, but out of care for children, for families, and for truth. Yes. I believe that if you want things to be better, care for your fellow man should reflect in what you're doing. And that goes for, any type of thing where people are being forced to give up their human rights unknowingly. It's very disgusting. And it's very disgusting to know that the same thing that I grew up with in the 90s and the early 2000s is still being done just in secret, hush hush. avoidjw is honored to stand alongside them and will continue to support their work in every way we can. Yep, and thank you for those who paid the price of speaking openly about your pain so others would not have to suffer in silence. This is what doing this for YouTube is all about for me, is that so people won't have to suffer in silence. Give them the encouragement that they need to speak out about the wrongs that have been done to them by this monster of an organization. Okay, that looks like is about it. Thanks for watching.